The moon shone brightly, beaming down upon Canterlot's castle, its gleaming walls, buttresses, illuminating the spires and towers that plunged their way towards the sky, on a night seemingly much like any other. However, the night was not normal by far. The sun had meant to rise several hours ago, however the moon was still high in the sky. The streets of Canterlot were packed with ponies, wondering where their son had gone. Many of them murmured amongst themselves quietly. Some said nothing, words caught in their throats by worry. Some even screamed and shouted in fear, running about the streets in total panic. There had been a commotion in the palace throne room, which had ended just moments earlier, with a giant rainbow shooting off into the sky. There had been violent flashes of light, the sound of shattering windows and breaking walls. The ground itself had shook, as if an earthquake had struck the city. None of the speculating ponies had any idea what had transpired, but all they knew that the absent sunrise and what sounded like a battle between gods were somehow related. Their attention was so focused on the throne room that none of them noticed the moon and the silhouette that had appeared there. In the throne room, hidden from the eyes of the crowd below, a large white alicorn lay on the floor, covered in wounds, many of which were not overly serious, some of which were. She lay upon the ground, her only movement the rise and fall of her chest as she panted for air. Tears ran freely down her face and onto the cold marble floor, and an expression of complete exhaustion and utter torment decorated her face. The throne room around her was in shambles. All the meticulously crafted stained glass windows were shattered. Bits and pieces of them lay scattered around the floor in the entire room. The walls and ceiling bore more than a few gaping holes, and the once pristine floor was cracked and gouged, barely recognizable as the flawless pearl-white surface it had once been. The thrones themselves lay in a shattered mess. Debris from the stonework littered the dais where they had once stood. Princess Celestia lay in utter despair, her mind blank, but her heart full of pain and sorrow. The wounds she bore on her body were nothing compared to the agony her heart felt at that moment. She lay still for several minutes, allowing the events that had just transpired to fully make their way into her conscious mind. Every second was a nightmare. Every breath sent racking sobs down her frame. She lay there in the state of for a time, whether for minutes, hours, days, or years, she could not have said. Once feeling began to seep back into her body, and every cut and bruise on her body began to painfully inform her of their presence all at once. She lifted her head and looked around, taking in the devastation around her. Her eyes caught on the 6 glistening shapes which lay in a rough circle around her, ranging in color from red to green, all appearing to be well-polished gemstones, the elements of harmony. As she watched, the elements began to darken, the inner light within them fading, and as they faded, a shell of stone began growing around each gem until they were almost perfect spheres of dull gray sandstone-looking rock, embellished with an embroidered engraving of the gemstones they had once been. The sight of them filled Celestia with disgust. She enveloped them in her magical aura and teleported them far away, to the ruin of a castle deep within the Everfree Forest, where she and her sister had once resided before becoming princesses. Thought of her sister brought new pain to her chest, and her throat and heart cried out in agony. Her own sister had attacked her. Princess Luna, who had declared herself to be Nightmare Moon, had refused to lower the moon to make way for the dawn. Celestia had known for some time that there had been something troubling her younger sister, but she had left Luna alone, thinking she would share her worries with her when she was ready. How wrong she had been. Celestia had been standing on the balcony of her room, having just woken up, ready to raise the sun as Luna lowered the moon. She had risen a little early, so she waited, enjoying the glory of her sister's nights. They were beautiful. The moon shone, full in the sky, and stars lit up the dark canvas in creative and wonderful patterns. The time had come for the moon to lower itself, and she prepared her magic, readying herself to haul the sun up from the horizon. The time came, and passed. Immediately, Celestia was struck with worry and fear. Luna had never even been a second late before. Celestia bolted from her balcony, ripped the doors open with her magic, and galloped down the hallway towards the stairs that led to the throne room. That was where her sister would surely be. Upon entering the cavernous room that contained the twin thrones of the royal pony sisters, she caught sight of Luna, standing at the edge of the room, gazing out one of the windows that lined the wall. She immediately knew that something was terribly wrong. Luna wore a strange set of ceremonial light plate mail, and her mane had shifted from a pleasant night blue to a lighter, sickly nightmarish shade. The look on her face screamed anger and rage, and her mouth was twisted in an ugly and wicked snarl. As she turned to face Celestia, the Princess of the Sun saw that her eyes had changed too. Her irises had become vertical slits, reminiscent of the dragons that they had sporadic dealings with. The overall effect of her sister's new changes spoke of evil and menace. "Sister," Celestia had almost whispered. "Luna, what has happened? Why have you not lowered the moon?" The dark blue alicorn stared back for several moments, before releasing a wicked laugh, and then she spoke. Her voice was deeper, more menacing, and a slight hiss rounded the corners of her words. It sent shivers down Celestia's spine. "Oh, dear sister, you have gotten here faster than I would have expected." She turned back to the window she had been gazing out of when Celestia arrived. "I barely had any time to appreciate the beginning of my eternal night." Celestia was dumbfounded, her mind blank. "Eternal night? Lulu, what?" Luna cut her off with a hard stomp of a hoof. "Lulu, Lulu, I am no longer your cute little sister, who allows you to lead her by the nose. Gone are the days when ponies bask and play in your oh-so-glorious sunlight, and spurn and hide from my beautiful night." The hatred dripped like venom from the fangs of Luna's mouth. "No longer am I Princess Luna. No, I have been reborn. I am now Nightmare Moon." This last statement was punctuated with another sharp stomp, which struck up sparks from the pristine marble floor. But the sound startled Celestia out of her stupor. "Sister, what has happened? Why are you doing this?" Luna's glare at her sister could have burnt holes in the walls. "Why? You want to know why? Have you any idea how it feels to pour your heart and soul into your work every night for centuries, only to have every pony shun it night after night?" Celestia opened her mouth to reply, but Luna interrupted her. "How could you understand? Every pony loves your day so much. Every pony loves you." For a moment, a look of intense sadness flashed across Luna's face, but it was gone in an instant. "I am hated and feared by the ponies who we supposedly rule, because I bring about the nighttime, while you are loved and adored, and for what?" Luna's eyes narrowed to a menacing squint, and her voice began dripping with hate. "They love you because they believe you are the one who takes away the night. They believe you are their savior every morning." The hurt reappeared in her eyes, but remained this time. Seeing this, Celestia saw her opportunity to overcome the madness that had seeped into Luna's mind. "But Luna, that's not true. Your nights are beautiful. Every pony knows that." She approached her troubled sister slowly, and reached out a hoof. "Luna, stop this. The world can't survive without the sun, just like it can't survive without your moon." Luna's head fell, hiding her eyes from sight, and she slowly, shakily, lifted her hoof as well. But as they were about to meet, she suddenly used her offered hoof to batter Celestia's away. Lifting her head, her eyes were again full of anger. But this time, there was envy there too. And in that moment, Celestia realized just how deeply this evil went. Her sister was not only angry at everypony for the slights she had imagined of them, she was jealous of her. She had to contain the situation quickly before something terrible happened, and she lost her sister forever. "Luna!" she pleaded, reaching out to her sister again, only to have her flinch away. "Luna, please, listen to me. Ponies do appreciate you. They love you as their princess, and I love you as my sister." Tears in her eyes, Celestia moved closer again to Luna, and gently nuzzled her neck. The night blue alicorn flinched again, but did not move away. "Celestia." Luna's voice was cracked with sorrow and anger and hurt. "Celestia, I'm sorry." As she said these last words, the venom returned to her voice, and before Celestia could react, Luna had already shoved her away. Looking up, she was just in time to see Luna's rear legs connect with her face in a vicious buck which sent her flying across the room and lay sprawled on the floor, stunning in more ways than one. Reaching up a hoof, Celestia felt the spot on her chin where her sister's hooves had connected. There was a savage cut there, and blood trickled out of the harsh incision as Celestia's mind attempted to process what had just happened. Luna had just attacked her. She regained her senses just in time to see a hostile bolt of magic speeding towards her, which she threw herself aside and to the ground to dodge. "Sister, what madness has taken you?" she shouted, the desperate plea in her voice plainly evident. "The time for talk is over, Celestia," Luna shouted in reply, charging another spell. "Defend yourself, sister. I will not be holding back." Releasing the bolt, the younger princess followed up by charging at her older sister. Celestia hurled herself to the side once more to dodge the second spellbolt, but was not prepared for Luna's physical assault, which came in the form of a full broadside body slam. Celestia was again knocked to the ground in an impact that forced the air out of her lungs. Struggling to her feet and attempting to regain her breath, Celestia conjured a shield to deflect a series of rapid-fire magical attacks. Her mind was still reeling with the horror of the situation. Her sister had been overcome by some sort of insanity, and was now trying to kill her. All the spells that her sister had cast were deadly ones. She stayed on the defensive as Luna sent spell after spell towards her, with every intention of killing or maiming her. She could sense the hostility in the spells, and was sure that if any one of them struck her, she would not likely be in any state to fight, if she survived at all. The spells ceased for a moment, and Celestia only just had time to dodge before an ethereal sword of solidified dark blue magic, the thin, weary blade slicing through the air where her neck had just been. Luna screamed a wordless shout and lunged again, and Celestia only just had time to form her own blade and parry. Even though she immediately had an opening with which she could have struck at her sister and ended the fight for good, she backed off. She would not kill her own sister. "Luna, please!" Luna cut her off again, with another cry of rage and a vicious stab with her sword. Celestia kept at her pleas, despite her sister's raging attacks and wordless screams, attempting to calm the situation down. The fight dragged on for several hours. Celestia remained on the defensive the entire time, never striking a blow of her own, always dodging and blocking and moving away. Their spellblades had shattered some time during the melee, and Celestia was alternating between hiding behind her ever-diminishing shield and dodging the vicious spells that had been thrown at her by her still enraged sister. Finally, Celestia collapsed, her energy depleted, her desperation to survive and save her sister no longer able to fuel her fight, when she had no intention of fighting back. She laid on the floor, panting. Her eyes closed. Scores of bruises, small nicks and scratches, and some deep cuts decorating her body, blood flowing freely from each one. She was spent, and all she could do now was expect the worst. Luna, while not having a single wound at all, was still clearly feeling the exertion of their prolonged battle. Her wings drooped lifelessly at her side, and she panted heavily, her coat damp with sweat and her sister's blood. She moved up to Celestia, an expression of triumphant glee overcoming any look of exhaustion. "Sister, you are a fool!" Celestia flourished, her tired eyelids open, and lifted her head to look pleadingly at Luna, who now stood above her, another, much smaller, eternal blade, barely longer than a knife, hovering in the air beside her. "If you wanted to survive, you should have fought to win," the Night Princess continued. "But instead, like a pitiful fool, you would not fight back. The ponies might love you, but you are not fit to rule this land." Too tired to speak, Celestia lowered her head back down and closed her eyes, waiting for the finishing blow. It never came. Several seconds passed, and Celestia had not yet felt the painful sting of a cut throat, nor the cold grip of death. Opening her eyes once again, she saw Luna still standing over her, still levitating the ethereal blade above the fallen alicorn's head, but a look of uncertainty dominating her features. Her eyes slightly glazed over, as if she was lost in thought or internal debate. Celestia saw another opening, and gladly took it. "Luna, I know you don't want to do this. It's not too late. We can fix this." Looking around, Celestia took in the shambles that the throne room had become, and desperately searched for something she could use to dispel the situation. Her eyes rested on the ruined thrones. Each had been embedded with 3 magical gemstones, known as the Elements of Harmony, which the two sisters had used to defeat the Draconius Discord after 1,000 years ago. She was about to dismiss them, because she was not capable of employing their overwhelming magic on her own, but she felt the gems, now lying scattered about the raised platform, where they were strewn during the fights, pulse. She had never felt them so intimidating before. They were calling to her, pleading to her for something, reaching out to them with the little magic she had left. She felt each gem connect to her. Each felt like a bolt of lightning running down her spine, painful but invigorating. All 6 elements were now under her control, and although she could not command them as completely as the two sisters did in unison, they wanted to be used. They wanted harmony to be restored. What would happen if she actually used them? She did not know. They had turned discord to stone, but she did not think that was the element's only function. Their purpose was to restore harmony where disharmony existed. How that took effect was only ever known after the magic was used. She decided to try one last time to reason with Luna, and if that failed, she would have no choice but to use the elements and hope for the best. "Luna, please!" Luna's eyes snapped back to focus as a wicked snarl drew across her face. "Please, Luna, please!" the blue alicorn mocked. "All you know how to do is plead for your life, sister, but it won't work." Luna stomped a forehoof again, knocking away several pieces of debris, which scattered across the floor, their clacking the only sound that could be heard. "It's too late for desperate pleas, and it's too late to go back. How could I go back now? I've already come so far. If the ponies of the world want to fear me, I shall give them reason to." She laughed maniacally, her mane billowing out behind her as she reared on her hind legs, before striking her forehoofs back down to the ground with such force that several more cracks joined the latticework that now decorated the once flawless floor. Celestia knew that she had lost her last chance. She had had so many opportunities to turn her sister back from this path of madness, yet she had failed. Sadness overcame her heart. She only had one option left to her now: the elements of harmony. As Luna began lowering her head menacingly, drawing her blade forward for the final attack, Celestia closed her eyes again and channeled all of her remaining magic into the elements of harmony. Luna paused as the noise of shifting rubble caught her attention, making her ears twitch, and she glanced away from her sister to see the elements hovering in the air, before speeding over to the pair, the magical aura knocking the attacking alicorn away. Celestia felt the power of the gems lifting her up off the ground, and when she raised her head, light spilled forth from her all-white eyes. The magic of the elements flowed through her, temporarily blocking out the pain from all her wounds. What is this?" Luna demanded, defiantly glaring at the elements, which were now spinning a slow circle around the older sister. "You think you can control the elements on your own, sister? You know that's futile. We could never work our magic on our own." Doubt and desperation seeped into Luna's voice as the gems began glowing brightly, and the light coming from Celestia's eyes brightened as well. Celestia felt the magic overwhelm her senses, and as the built-up of energy became almost unbearable, she unleashed the magic at Luna. It was not a spell as such, or at least not one as she knew it. The elements of harmony used the magic from the bearer, amplified it between the 6 gemstones, and used the energy to shift the reality of the world into a more harmonic one, whose definition of harmonic the elements used was not a known fact to Celestia, and she could not have prepared herself for what happened. As the magic was released from the stones, the light grew to a blinding intensity, and a brilliant rainbow shot out from the elements, arcing high into the air, almost to the roof of the throne room, before shifting direction and plunging back down at Princess Luna, spinning around her in a tight whirlwind. Luna's cries, whether of pain, shock, or denial, Celestia could not tell, but they shook her to her core. She watched as the rainbow spun faster and faster around her sister before shooting directly upwards, blasting another hole in the already damaged ceiling. Following the rainbow with her gaze, she watched as it flew directly up towards the moon, and she knew that she had just imprisoned her own sister on the celestial body. As the rainbow containing Luna made contact with the whitish disk, a pantheon of things happened at once. A dark silhouette appeared on the face of the moon, depicting Nightmare Moon's head, its single visible eye glaring down at the world with menace. However, Celestia could not spare the thought to notice it. She felt some huge, familiar part of herself tear away with a horrifying, painful retch, as if her stomach had just been forcibly removed from her body. She fell back to the ground, the magic no longer holding her up, and lay there, shuddering. She felt empty, hollow inside, as if she and the world would never be right again. And then, as if some pony had projected a movie directly into her brain, she saw a vision. She saw almost 1,000 years pass in a matter of seconds, the only noticeable change between the days being 4 stars, which slowly moved closer and closer to the moon, before passing behind it, and in a flash of light, the shape of her sister's face disappeared. She saw a massive magical backlash of such a powerful spell being broken, sealing her inside the sun, replacing Luna on the world. This image horrified her, as she saw the terror her sister would spread upon her return. But she also saw another image. 6 young mares, strong-willed and determined, standing united against the evil that Luna became. And she somehow knew that they would wield the elements of harmony in her stead and defeat Nightmare Moon once more, as she was no longer connected to them herself, being cut off from her sister as she was. The images faded from her mind, and she rested her head back on the floor. She could not rest for long. The sun still needed to rise, but she would have to use twice the energy. Tears flooded her eyes as she thought about what she had to do. She had to lower her sister's moon herself first. So there she lay, gathering her strength as she prepared to do what was necessary. She struggled to her feet and gazed out the window. She knew she had rejuvenated herself enough to raise the sun, but lowering the moon first would be a monumental task. She reached out with her magic, far out into space, and felt the moon. She immediately recoiled. The moon felt like a seething mass of pure hatred and anger, tainted by Nightmare Moon's presence. She probed the celestial body cautiously, and once she ensured that Luna could no longer do her any harm, she gripped the moon in her magic, and heaved it until it slowly began to descend out of the sky. As the moon made its sluggish way down towards the horizon, a huge chorus of cheers and joyful celebrations resounded in the streets of Canterlot. The citizens of the royal capital were rejoicing at the impending return of the day. Luna's anger flared, enraged by the pony's elation towards the end of night. The immense surge of hostile emotion almost unhinged Celestia's control of the moon, as she clung to it in a desperate attempt to prevent it from breaking orbit and crashing into the earth. After several minutes of struggle, Celestia finally managed to lower the moon out of sight completely, and almost fell to the floor again in exhaustion. But she had one more task to complete. Despite her tiredness, she reached out to the sun and willed it into the sky, creating a breathtaking crimson and gold sunrise over the eastern walls of the city. To Celestia, the sight was as gray and lifeless as her heart felt at that moment. Her sister was gone, locked away in the moon for 1,000 years. She knew that, in such a great amount of time, Luna would be forgotten, lost to the histories, all memories of her dying with the ponies who remembered them. She was very familiar with the passage of time. Ponies need to be wary. If Luna returned after those 1,000 years of imprisonment as Nightmare Moon, they would need to know of the dangers she possessed. She racked her tired mind as she hauled herself up the stairway to her bedroom, intending on getting some much-needed rest after such a horrific ordeal. Reaching her bedroom doors, which were still hanging off their hinges from the earlier rushed exit, she wondered where the castle staff was. There were always guards stationed at her door, as well as the doors to Luna's room and the throne room, and some other rooms like the treasury. No guards were in sight, but Celestia's tired mind barely processed the worry necessary to wonder much about it. She could only hope they were there when she woke up again. She stumbled over to her bed and flopped down on the soft mattress, not bothering to crawl under the covers. As she slowly drifted off into consciousness, her mind still ran over ideas in her head. She smiled as an idea occurred to her. She would make a day, this day, in fact, in dedication to her sister. It would be a holiday, a time for fun and games, for dressing up and scaring friends. It would be just like Luna's old self. On the outside, possibly scary and intimidating if you didn't know her, but deep down, a lover of fun and good times. It would be a grand holiday, one that the old Luna would have appreciated. She knew just what she would call it, too. She would call it Nightmare Night.